Hi, this is Bobby Kimbrough, and welcome again Off the Cuffs. Today I'm excited to have with me Dr. Sumanth, professor at Wake Forest, PhD. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm going to try to learn something from you. But anyway, welcome to Off the Cuffs. Glad to have you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you know what we like to do is when we have people here, a lot of times people know the guests, sometimes they don't. And we just like the guests to tell us about you. How did you arrive here? Tell us about you. I know you and I were talking. You're from the 305. You're from Miami, Dade County. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, so my route to come to Winston-Salem is pretty untraditional, quite honestly. I never thought I'd be in the position I'm in now, being a professor at Wake Forest for the last 7 years.
Wow.
So I teach organizational behavior and leadership to our MBAs and our undergraduates and executives. But I really didn't start out thinking I wanted to be a professor, in part because my dad was a professor.
So you're third generation, you told me, right?
Third generation of professors in our family. And so he was a professor at the University of Miami.
That's where you went to undergraduate at?
That's where I did my undergrad,
okay.
at the U.
At the U?
At the U. But what it taught me was just being exposed to so many different people from different walks of life. And so I grew up in a predominantly African-American neighborhood in Miami. And then most of my friends were black and Jamaican, and learned how to hang and try to play basketball and football with those guys.
So you know about jerk chicken and all that good stuff?
All that good stuff.
What?
Yeah, that's
beans
all we,
and rice?
Beans and rice,
Black
collard
beans and
greens,
rice,
conch fritters, you name it.
Yeah.
So we had all that good stuff growing up, and then we moved, and I went to a high school where Kimbrough Slice, the late Kimbrough Slice, went to high school with me. And so we were friends next.
Kimbrough Slice was the knockout guy,
right?
The
knockout guy.
Yeah.
That's right. Him and Rohan Marley sat next to me on either side in Spanish class.
Wow.
I remember in high school. And so it was fun being able to be with those guys. And but, you know, growing up in that neighborhood, such a diverse environment, taught me about just people and understanding how to appreciate people from different walks of life. And so when I started work in Miami, I worked at Norwegian Cruise Line for about 6 years, doing strategic planning and marketing. And then through the course of some restructurings, I ended up getting promoted to a position a couple levels from the CEO. And so I'm the youngest guy sitting in the boardroom thinking to myself, what am I doing here? Because I really don't fit in. But learned a lot about leadership, just observing how people were acting.
So you went to graduate school in Miami as well?
I did my MBA at Florida.
Okay.
As I like to say, everybody makes a mistake
Sunshine
at least
State,
once in their life.
Yeah.
But I did my PhD at Chapel Hill, so that's what brought us to North Carolina the first time.
And then you ended up at Wake?
Ended up at Wake since 2013. And we love it here. My family, my wife and I have been married over 20 years now.
You don't look old enough to be married 20 years. Wow.
But yeah, she took a flyer on me, so she's put up with a lot to get to 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
so you said something that was very interesting, and it kind of put a pause right there when you talked about growing up in Miami. You talked about the diversity and learning to appreciate different things. In this climate that we're in now, based on what you've seen and what you see, tell me how important diversity is. Tell me how important that leadership that we're talking about as it relates to getting through these difficult times, getting through this climate, this atmosphere that we're currently in.
Yeah, I think the times we're living in are remarkable. And unfortunately, I think what has happened is so many of us, we see people just on the surface level. And so when we think about diversity, right, the natural inclination is just to look at the outside, skin color, gender, things that are observable, if you will.
Exactly.
And what we don't realize is that diversity is actually much deeper than that. And so we differentiate it. We call it surface diversity versus deep level diversity. And it's really the deep level diversity that matters ultimately in organizations for their effectiveness. It's people's values, it's their personality, it's their skill sets. All of those things tend to be actually much more important to organizational effectiveness. And so in this climate, I fear we're not getting to that because we're so focused on the surface level. And so part of what I think you're doing through these conversations is getting people to step back and say, I need to look at people more holistically.
You got to.
You have to. You can't just look at the surface characteristics because ultimately you'll get an incomplete picture.
So true.
And I think one of the things I realized growing up in such a diverse area is everybody has different stories. Everyone's got their hurts, their heartaches, their successes, but that's what makes them them. And so if you take the time to actually understand and get to know that about people, you'll find you have a lot more in common with them than you think you do. And
so
then these
true.
issues about, race and gender and other things, they start to diminish.
So how do we get there? How do we get beyond that place? How do we break those walls down to where we have conversation? One of the things that we're big on here is that communication is key. We've got to be able to sit and talk through our differences, no matter what they may be. We have to be able to sit and communicate with one another. Yeah. So, from your perspective, how do we break down, or how do you see we break down those barriers to where we can sit at a table and have a conversation about very difficult topics? I know that sometimes people don't want to have conversations about topics that sometimes are very uncomfortable with them.
It's a hard thing to do, to have these kinds of conversations, but you're absolutely right. They're necessary for us to make progress as a society, as organizations. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to assume positive intent in people. I think part of the problem we have is that we're so quick to judge. We want to be judge, jury, and executioner. And when we stop to realize that people's intentions are often hidden, we see the behavior,
right,
but we don't see the intentions.
So true.
And the intentions are actually what's driving or motivating the behavior, and that's what we need to actually stop and say, let me think about this from their perspective. Let me actually take their perspective on an issue and see if I could maybe understand it more deeply.
See, you're taking people to Quantico now. See, one of the things that in Quantico that we studied is that the intent drives the behavior.
Absolutely.
Not the behavior driving the intent.
Yeah.
And so when you said that about how the intent in an individual drives who they are and the behavior. So when we start looking at what's happening in our society, we look at the divide, the great divide that I'm seeing every day. My thing is how do we slow that gap from dividing so much?
I mean, I think the more we can do to give people exposure to different groups of people, right? Understanding that what you have maybe heard on the news, what you've heard from your friends, you don't know that that's true for a fact. You actually have to go out and experience it yourself. And I think even for my own students that I teach, one of the benefits for them would be to get into the community and go to a place, particularly if you've come from a really affluent upbringing, go to a place where people don't have basic necessities and actually live amongst those people for a little while and get to talk to them and understand how they live and then hear their needs. Right? That's what we need more empathy, and we don't have that.
That is so true. I spent a couple of years in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and Cité Soleil, Camp Haitian, and it gave me such a great appreciation for life.
Yep.
It gave me a great appreciation just for simple things like water.
Yep.
And so now that whole look from what I have seen, gives me a totally different look when I look at something. I look at it beyond the surface. And other things, like a lot of times I say, we got to look beyond the surface, look beyond what I see. And so that's very interesting that you said that, because I think that the diversity, and when we look at things like that and we look at the differences that we have, I think that the differences is what make us great. Whether we're talking about a company, whether we're talking about a basketball, baseball, whether we're talking athletics, whether we're talking just in our society, it's a diversity that makes us stronger and greater. And I think sometimes we fail to realize that, and that's what keeps us from being as great as we could be.
I mean, I think pre-COVID, travel was one way we could do that, right? And I'm very thankful to my parents. From the time I was a little child, they would take me to India, and we would go, and I would see extreme poverty and understand that, just having a clean glass of water to be able to drink.
Family from India?
Originally from India, yeah.
What part?
So from a southern city called Hyderabad.
Okay.
Where pretty much all your IT is based out of now, call centers and other tech companies. But
my daughter-in-law is from India, same place, Saganya.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so just being able to experience that from an early age and see that, the way we live in America, we are the 1%. I don't care where you are economically. Just being, by the fact that you're in this country, you're the 1%.
Right.
Relative to the rest of the world. And so appreciating that, I think, is what also allowed me to be able to make friends with people from all different walks of life.
So when you go into a business and a business invites you in, they come in, they want you to sit, they want you to talk, they want you to analyze their business, their structure from the ground up all the way to the senior level executives. When you go in, what is the first thing you're looking for?
So it's a great question. I'm actually asking, the first thing I do is I ask people questions about, tell me what it's like to work here. And I asked this particular question: what would happen in your organization that wouldn't happen anywhere else? And what that will tell me is, what is that culture like? Because ultimately, the culture is created by the leadership.
Without question.
Right? And that pervades and creates the environment that allows people to either flourish or keeps them from achieving their best. And so I'm really keen on seeing, what do people say on the front lines, but then particularly how do leaders perceive the culture? Because what you often find is this disconnect, right?
True.
That leaders are talking about all these great things that they're doing, their values, et cetera, and then you ask the people, so are those things actually modeled? And they'll tell you, no, of course not. That's just lip service. That's just stuff on a website. And so you start to see whether or not there's alignment or disconnection. And so that's like real key.
I'm going to have to get you to come here and go through the hallways and conduct a survey and say, hey, how do you like working here? Tell me some things here that are doing here that they're not doing.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, see what kind of feedback you get, right?
For sure.
Make sure you write their names down when you ask them questions, too. Yeah, that's very interesting that you said that. So when you go into these places and you look and you start to talk about the culture of an organization, do you see that culture in the organization as a reflection of the area in which they're living in? Or like, for example, if you went into, let's say, somewhere in London, Kentucky, and you start asking questions, is their culture representative of the place in which they come from?
Yep.
Or is their culture, like there are subcultures within law enforcement, there are subcultures within everything that we do, right?
Right.
So tell me, when you go in, how do you see that?
Yeah, so you can go in any organizational area and find subcultures, right?
True.
But part of what makes the culture ultimately is the people.
Right.
And so depending upon where those people are coming from, if you're recruiting people from a certain city, right, locally as opposed to maybe nationally, you're going to get some of that cultural influence naturally into your organization. And so you have to be cognizant of that. So thinking about, okay, if we're going to recruit in Forsyth County or Winston-Salem, what is the culture of this place? What is the perception around diversity, for example? And how might then that be influencing people's attitudes and behaviors when they come to work for us?
So let me ask you a question. We pride ourselves on being transparent, right?
Sure.
Do you see a lot of diversity here?
In Winston-Salem?
Yeah.
Relative to other cities I've lived in, no.
Okay. Do you see a lot of diversity when you look at law enforcement here?
I see more diversity on the law enforcement side.
You do?
I do.
Okay. Thank you.
And,
we didn't pay you to say that either. So let's take it home. When you look at Wake Forest, you see a lot of diversity there. Now, you don't have to answer that. I don't want Dr. Hatch to fall out with you.
Not at all. Not at all.
Do you see a lot of diversity there?
No, and I think Wake realizes it. And
Okay.
in fact, it's something that we're trying to address pretty hard. I'm actually on a committee to hire a chief diversity officer that we were looking to fill that position right before COVID hit.
Wow.
And so we realize it's a glaring gap.
So diversity is an issue all over our country.
Absolutely.
Diversity is an issue, not only whether it's at a university, whether it's in all over this country. And when I look at that and you look at that, do you think that diversity plays a role in where we are now?
I do. I mean, I think that the fact that people have not been as exposed to people of different backgrounds, nationalities, religions, you name it, orientations, that unfortunately then creates fear. I think part of what drives a lot of these reactions is when you don't know something, you're afraid of it.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
True.
And once you've started to actually understand it, it's less scary, it's less threatening to you. And so you have no need to fear people who are different than you or who come from different backgrounds. And so the more we can do to kind of expose people to other walks of life, to different groups of people, the more some of those barriers get to be broken down. And I've often thought, even for our Wake students, go spend a semester in Miami, particularly for our white students, and be the minority. Feel what that's like to be the minority, where everyone's speaking to you in Spanish, and you're looking at them like, what are you talking about?
Right.
You have to understand that kind of environment to be able to then appreciate what you have, so that when you come back, you are much more welcoming of people who aren't like you.
That is so true. When I was traveling and working with the government, I would go into countries that spoke not English. English was nowhere to be found. And it was kind of an awkward feeling, to be in places.
It's uncomfortable, right?
Even as an African American, it was awkward for me to be in Haiti, where people had the exact same skin tone. It was awkward because, one, I didn't understand the culture. It's a totally different culture, totally different language, totally different way of doing things. And so that brings up a good point, that you have to be not only tolerant, but you have to be understanding of people, their cultures, where they're from, their whole being, from a holistic point of view. And I think that's when you find the magic. That's when you find the strength in one another, realizing, hey, I can learn something from you as well as you can learn something from me, regardless of our different places and spaces and where we've come from in life.
But you know what? That takes time.
Yeah.
It takes an investment, an intentional investment of time. And what we'd rather do is we'd rather send a tweet, or we'd rather post something on Facebook to initiate and say we support, a group of people.
Yeah.
But to actually take the next step to actually get to know them and have a meal with them, that's a whole nother level of commitment. But that's actually what you need to be doing. And so when we try to, even with our students, try to get them to form teams and work together effectively, before I ever assign them anything, the first thing I'll have them do is I say, go and actually talk about one another, get to know one another as people, have a meal together or two. And they look at me and think, that's just a waste of our time. We just want to work on the project or the task. And I say, that's actually the less important thing. The task will take care of itself once you've actually built trust with one another, because right now you don't trust each other. And until you build those bonds of trust, teams can't function, organizations can't function, society can't function, right? And what I think we're seeing right now is there's a fundamental breakdown in trust at so many levels, in terms of leadership, in terms of institutions, other things.
I used to coach Pop Warner football up at the Tiny Vikings right up in Mineral Springs. And when my little guys would get into a fight with one another, I would make them lock their arms up, and they would walk the track together. And while they're walking the track, they would have to know what each other's mother's names, siblings are, where they go to school at, where they live at, and they would have to be their birthdays, what they like, their favorite colors, what they like to eat. In other words, I made them get to know one another while they're walking, because it's very difficult to go to war or fight somebody that I know who your mother is, I know your family. We have something in common. And then you realize in one case, the two kids found out that they were born just a day apart.
Oh, wow.
One birthday is this day, the other guy's birthday was the next day. It was amazing to me what you just said, is that I find myself sometimes, when you get to know people and you get to really go beneath the surface, you realize that we all are vulnerable.
Absolutely.
We all have the basic desires. We want the same things for our family, for ourselves. We all have a place in life we want to arrive at, someone we want to become. And I think that sometimes in life we get so caught up in barriers, that keep us from actually being who we could be. And so when I heard that you was coming and we talked about leadership, I think that right now in this society and what we're dealing with now is that the leadership that is present or not present is going to make or break us.
Absolutely.
Leadership will take us places we shouldn't be and take us places we should have been. And so that is very interesting when we talk about leadership. I've always been fascinated with that. As a little boy growing up, it's amazing to me how I was fascinated by Martin, Malcolm, so many people, John F. And it was just amazing to me how I realized even in my own home, leadership present. And so I think that when we look around in our society and our businesses, all the entities within our society, we've got to figure out a way to include what you just talked about, the diversity. We've got to realize what the intent is. When we talk about all these things, how do we become better? So if I were to ask you a question about leadership, if I were to say to you, Doc, tell me something, based on your years of experience and your education, the places you matriculated from, tell me, what would you say that if we practice in our society would make us stronger, not only stronger people, individuals, but stronger leadership, things that you see are missing?
I'd say it comes down to building the foundation of leadership. And the foundation of leadership, effective leadership, is trustworthiness. And so when we define trustworthiness, there's really three components. It's not just your competence. So a lot of people think you're leaders because you're good at something. That's one facet of it. And a lot
Right.
of people get promoted because they're competent in their jobs into positions of leadership. But leadership and trust is far deeper than that. So when I say I trust you or you trust me, you might trust my credentials, but do you trust my integrity?
Exactly.
Right? Do you trust that my word means something? That's
True.
the second dimension. And then the third is, do you trust my intentions, my benevolence? Do I sort of put others above myself, or am I all in it for myself? And so it's actually all three of those components of caring, compassion, right, integrity, character, and competence. Those are the facets that really drive people's trust in leaders. And so when we see people not trusting institutions or particular leaders right now, it's because those three facets are not present, right? Maybe one of them is, or maybe none of them are. And so for you to actually be an effective leader, you have to realize that's what people are perceiving of you. They're looking to your integrity. Does the sheriff walk the talk every single day from an integrity standpoint, or is it just sort of lip service for us? Right? Does he actually know his stuff from a competence perspective? Is he constantly pushing himself to learn and to get better? Right? And does he put others' needs and interests above his own? And I think that's the key hallmark of leadership. I think I tell my students, if you want to be popular, don't be a leader, because leadership is lonely, right?
And you know what? That'll, as they say in the church, that'll preach right there. That'll preach.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be willing to take the hits if you want to be in positions of leader. So people want the accolades
I
of
get hit
leadership,
every day.
but nobody wants to realize and acknowledge that it's a lonely place.
I get hit even when I shouldn't get hit. I get hit, don't even know where to come from.
Got to dodge them.
Yeah, dodge them. Yeah. That's interesting you say that. Yeah. So tell me this. So what's it like being a professor at Wake? I'm going to switch gears on you. What's it like being there?
You know, part of why I left my corporate job was because I wanted to do something where I felt I was making an impact on people's lives, and I didn't feel like I was doing that in my corporate career enough, to a big enough extent. And so one of the great joys is being able to teach and to help students and see their trajectory over time and to help them develop. And so for me, teaching is a real passion. It's one of my callings in life, and one of the reasons why I chose to do what I do.
So your why is love, huh? You loved empowering people, huh?
I do. I love to see people take what we teach and then apply it in their own lives, both personally but also as leaders in organizations, and to see people flourish in that way. That's what really jazzes me up and excites me. And I love to work with my colleagues. I've got wonderful colleagues in my area, and so it's pretty remarkable that in our group we have people who I get along with, every single one of them. I consider them my friends. It's why I chose to stay here and hopefully be here for a really long time.
You've been here how many years? You say 5?
7 years.
Seven?
7 years. So I just made tenure last year, which means I've got a job for life if I want it, and I don't have any plans to go anywhere anytime soon.
That's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Glad to have you in Winston-Salem.
Absolutely.
That's all right. You have any kids?
I do. Two daughters.
Two daughters.
2 daughters, raising girls in this day and age. And so one is 11, going into 6th grade. The other's 8, going on 18. If you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
But
don't have daughters, but I know how they think they're grown before they actually grown.
Absolutely.
Think they're teenagers before they were.
That's right.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
So I'm glad I know the sheriff now.
Stop.
Once the boys start knocking on the door here pretty soon.
Yeah, give me a call. I got some fixers here. We'll fix it for you. Yeah. So tell me this. So right now, in this climate that we're in, right? This divide that we're in, I'm constantly looking for ways to start to build and create leadership within, not only within this office of the sheriff, but within the community. Is there some type of thing that we could do to where we start to create young leaders? So we start taking, let's say, for example, let's say I come to you and I say, Doc, I got an idea, right? And I got a place to do this. So let's say you do a lot of volunteering, Doc? You do?
I serve on the board at Winston-Salem Christian.
My man.
Yeah. and also a nonprofit that my parents founded many years ago after my brother passed.
So I'm always looking for partners, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say, COVID-19 has hit us. Mm-hmm. School is going to be a totally different look this year, right?
Yep, absolutely.
What do you say if you and I partnered, right? And I got a location for us, right? Mm-hmm. I'm back in school myself, right? Working on a PhD. Mm-hmm. So let's say you and I partnered, and I say, Doc, on Saturdays, we're going to volunteer our time. Mm-hmm. And we're going to grab a group of kids, mm-hmm. and we're going to start mentoring with them, maybe a couple hours on a Saturday. Mm-hmm. I got a location, secured location, yep. at a school, at a university, mm-hmm. and we're going to give our times to where we're going to create our own leadership program. Mm-hmm. And we're going to start before they ever get college ready.
Absolutely. Leadership starts really early. I mean, if you think about like the definition of leadership, mm-hmm. it's not a position. It's about positive influence.
That's right.
It's about positive influence, but that influence is morally infused. And so some of my co-authors and I actually wrote a paper talking about you can't separate leadership from morality, that is actually at the heart of it. The reason why people respond negatively to certain leaders is because they perceive a lack of morality. And so when you extract that, it's not leadership. It seems like coercion. It seems like forcing views on people, manipulation in some ways. But no, I agree. I think that's a...
So you'd be interested in doing that?
Absolutely. Really? Be interested in doing that with you. Absolutely. And I think the more we can
do this... You know this is recorded, right?
I know it's recorded, so I'm committing myself on air. But yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And let's figure out ways to get our young people exposed to leadership opportunities early, because it starts early, right? Leadership is about how do you treat your peers? How do you stand up for when somebody's being bullied, right? That's an act of leadership.
So you know what? So I got you committed. I got Dr. Sandeep Gopalan. You met him?
I have not.
He's a Rhodes Scholar, Oxford graduate, brilliant man like yourself. I got him committed.
Terrific.
And one or two other people. And I think that if we start that'll be game changers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, we could create it. I feel like we could get the funding to do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think because what you're doing is you're role modeling it.
Right, and you're a young man. You got a lot more energy than I do. So, I'm trying to
These gray hairs don't say that.
Yeah, no. I know you're younger than I am. You told me what year you graduate, so I know you're younger than I am, right?
Fair enough.
So I need a younger man, with that energy, because I have so much going on to actually keep the fire going. Yeah. I like that. Doc, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise.
But before I go, I want you to share something with us that you think would be helpful to the viewers, to the people that are out there. It doesn't have to be about leadership. It doesn't have to be about Wake Farr. It could be a life lesson that you've learned from your travels. It could be from your experiences. I always talk about one that changed my life, that defining moment, something that was defining in your life that changed your trajectory, something that was in your life that caused you to see life from a different place. And so mine was, I've had several in my life, but the time in Haiti really opened my life to a total different perspective, a whole new look at humility in terms of humbling yourself and being grateful. Yep. It gave gratefulness a new meaning to me to see that.
That's the key to happiness right there.
You know what?
Gratitude.
That's true. I live my life now where I don't look for happiness. Mm-hmm. I've been happy before. To me, I'm not.
Happiness is fleeting.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about being happy to me. If somebody else can be happy, I'm grateful. I don't even look for happiness no more. I look at it as like, you know what, my purpose now in life is to accomplish goals, is to change atmospheres. Yep. And so, but yeah, at one point in my life, I was looking for happiness, but I don't seek that anymore.
Yeah. I think it's very much my story as well. So when I was working at the cruise line, had ambitions to one day be CEO. In fact, my boss at the time, he came and said, John, you know what? If you stick with this for another 20, 30 years, you could be CEO one day. And so I thought to myself, I'm a big shot, right? I'm kind of hanging out with all the important people.
Yeah.
And June 23rd, 2000, I just come back from lunch with some friends. And there's a ton of messages on my phone telling me to come to the hospital right away. And it turned out my younger brother, Paul, who was 20 years old at the time, had been killed in a car accident.
Wow.
And so that was, for me...
What year was that?
That was 2000. So exactly 20 years. So my wife and I got married in February. He was my best man. June, a few months later, he's dead in a car accident. And so that for me was transformational. That all of a sudden reprioritized my mindset and said, is this really what I want? Is this what I'm living for? Is this going to make an impact in terms of what I'm doing? And so I realized that I needed to do something that was a lot more about helping people and getting people to see what I saw in them in some ways. I think a lot of times we don't see what's in us. It takes somebody else seeing what's in us to get us to rise to that level, and that's what happened for me too. And so that was for me a foundational experience, and seeing particularly how my parents responded to that, because I think for some people that can create a lot of bitterness and heartache, and instead they use that opportunity to found a ministry in his memory in India, and so now they serve thousands of orphans in India and provide them an education. They've built churches. They've helped AIDS victims.
So I was about to take us home, right? But you said something about a culture in India.
Yeah.
So is it the village? Are the villages of different parts of?
There's tons of different villages that they go to.
Okay, so the place where my daughter Tumble, right? Tamil is the language, right? Or is that the place?
Tamil is, that's one of the languages. Right. So every state almost has its own language.
Well, she speaks Tumble.
Okay.
Whatever part of the state, that's where she's from. But anyway, they have a culture in Tumble where once you reach a certain place in life, it's almost like you're obligated to come back to one of the orphanages and adopt the kids, because you have some of the largest orphanages in the world.
That's right.
And so they went back 2 years ago. I have 3 grandkids, 2 and 1 that they adopted. So 3, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
And so I was having a conversation with my daughter-in-law and my son, Saganya, and my son, Bobby, and they were talking to me and explaining to me how that when you go back, when you reach a certain place in life and you go back, you have an obligation to give back.
That's right.
Right. And so I thought about that when you said the missions that your father were going and the ministries that they created. So they adopted a little girl, and had her lip fixed. She had a very, very severe cleft lip, and so for the last 2 years, every year she has to have surgery up until I think she's about 7, 8 years old to fix that by the time she gets to be in her teen years. But that's amazing that when you said that about the culture and you talked about ministries, people find these things in life that they decide, because of this, I'm going to do that. Yeah. And by doing that, it makes us stronger as people. It gives our life a lot more meaning than it really had in life.
Gives you a sense of purpose.
Exactly, that purpose.
And ultimately, the biggest fulfillment you'll find is when you serve others in life. Right.
And I think that's what drives me, serving other people. I think that's what gets me high. You know, I better be careful how I use the word high, right? You know, for the record, I don't drink, I don't smoke, but that gets me, that sends the endorphins in my head up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so I'm very grateful for you. I am. It's a pleasure meeting you. And you heard it here. You heard it from Doc. We're going to start this Leadership Academy because I see so much happening where that role model, that mentoring, that leadership will make a difference in our community, because those social issues that we have at some point in life becomes criminal issues. And if we start young enough and we start mentoring young men and young women, that we could really make a difference by doing that. And by you sharing your story, you teaching, me mentoring, me teaching, and a few other people coming together, that would be just a game changer, especially under this new normal, unknown that we are living in, to where school is going to be totally different than it has ever been. This online schooling and so many things. I think that we could really make a difference by doing something like that.
I mean, having that sense of community is going to be so important, even more so, I think, in this day of COVID, because I don't know about you, but the fact that I probably won't even be on campus very much this semester, and I'm already missing it.
Yeah.
You know, just the interactions with students and faculty and others. And so the more we can build a sense of community and get those kids feeling like they matter and we know who they are and we know their stories, most importantly. We don't just see them as from a certain group of people.
I got a couple places that I'm sure we could use. I mean, I'm going to even volunteer Piedmont, even though they probably saying, no, he just volunteered our schools. Max, if you list, I'm going to volunteer your space over in the Winston Tower, and have to, we volunteer our little space here.
Yeah.
But I want you to know I appreciate you. It's been a pleasure talking
Likewise.
with you. I'm going to give you the last word before I take us home, because it has truly been a pleasure talking with you, and I've enjoyed myself.
Likewise. So thank you again, Sheriff, for having me. It's been a real honor, and I appreciate all the work you're doing in Forsyth County and helping to build bridges. There's a lot of people who can throw bombs, but very few who are trying to actually build bridges the right way, and you're one of them. So
I appreciate that.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Once again, this is Off the Cuff. Thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your week.